Welcome, age of vintage society. Frank Langella is a man of immense talent and a preference for older women. Like the audience, these women seem not to have enough of him. Why people were sure about Frank Langella's homosexuality. Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Age of Vintage channel. There'll always be the question of Frank's sexuality. We know he loves women, that isn't in doubt, and he has a type too. 20-something older than him and slightly wrinkled. But there's this what if hanging around the man. What if he was bisexual? The answer to this, well, is hazy. Frank has heard the rumours, but he hasn't denounced them. Rather, he inflamed them by detailing some encounters with Raul Julia and Jill Clayburgh. Frank said of Raul defined real masculinity. He also went further to say that Raul was different from the male stars of the time who were muscles without sensuality. Frank would know all about sensuality and Raul's masculinity. After all, out of everyone he could show off to, Raul removed his trousers to show Frank his new boxer briefs, which would have displayed his masculinity to Frank. That evening, after a couple of drinks, Raul would declare to Frank, "Good night, Frank. I love you. You are my boyfriend." There was also the time Raul, Jill and Frank were in a topless passionate embrace with hands and mouths that wandered. So is Frank bisexual? We will leave you to decide that, but we will add that the encounter between him, Jill and Raul was fast, hot and dirty. There was also that encounter with Laurence Olivier, who acted alongside Frank in the film version of Dracula in 1978. Like Frank, Olivier also faced speculations about his sexuality. Olivier, who played Professor Van Helsing to Frank's Dracula, shared a hotel with Frank, and he had a habit of passing comments about Langella's naughty bits. Frank's initial approach was wearing boxers instead of his preferred naked sleeping. At one point, without saying why he did it, Frank went to the bathroom naked, staying at the door that separated their rooms, and said, "Oh, Professor, see anything you like?" Olivier, in his loud voice, complimented Frank, but pointedly avoided looking at his naked body when he left the bedroom. You can't even ask him to come to say what it is. His publicity manager would give you the rules for questioning the stage star as soon as you approach him. The agent will yell, "You will not ask Mr. Langella anything about his personal life." No one knows much about the star's life, and his 1977 marriage to his then-wife, Ruth Wheel, exemplifies this. They had 2 children together and later divorced. The cause of divorce is a closely guarded secret. No one knows. While there will always be a raging debate about his sexuality because of his not coming out to declare it, there's no doubt about his love for cougars, not the one from the cat family. The thespian is grateful to Bunny Mellon, as she helped refine him and also prepared him for a life of forming and maintaining relationships with those higher in station than him. The two met at the Cape Playhouse in Dennis, Massachusetts, when Bunny came for her daughter. Frank took her in, and she polished him. Despite the class difference, she didn't look down on Frank. She never humiliated the esteemed thespian when she wanted to correct him. A true gentlewoman, Bunny was. She had Frank read the work of philosophers and fill in the gaps in his knowledge he never knew he had. Also, Mrs. Mellon introduced Langella to the cream of society. He met John F. Kennedy, who he discovered had a sense of humour and loved listening to dirty jokes. Frank saw how relaxed the president could be and how loud his laughs were. The president also had a goofy, playful side. He would leap onto coffee tables and dance to his heart's content. After the fun, the president would get into the helicopter and depart. Frank also met the Queen of England and her mother. Mellon had taught him how he could hold his own among these dignitaries. She told Langella that the trick to keeping the conversation going was to repeat what the person had said last. So, while Mellon was responsible for Frank's education, there's a deafening silence on if the education involved the bedroom. Due to Frank's preference for women, people believe that something went on between the two, but there isn't much to go on except conjectures. But if you're looking for women Frank did have sexual relationships with, then you should be looking at Rita Hayworth. Rita was 20 years older and was also sick. She had Alzheimer's and didn't help her case by binging on wine and bourbon. It was like she celebrated her sickness each night. However, the alcohol was an escape for Rita, who was once a head-turner in her teens. As she drank with Frank, who interestingly played her son in the now mostly forgotten film The Wrath of God, the past tugged at her. She remembered her glory days at night, but in the day she couldn't remember her lines until they were placed next to the camera, written in a big format. Their affair started on the set of The Wrath of God, which was a western, and it was passionate. They spent their time off set together in the throes of an orgasmic symphony. The actor was taken in by the actress who, though was in her 50s, still retained her good looks. He would gaze upon her so intently that the actress would become shy and say, "Don't stare at me, baby, you can see me in the movies." But their relationship was and remained an affair. When the film was done, for Frank, so was the relationship. Rita saw things in a different manner. She wanted it to go on. As Frank prepared to drive away from the set, Rita dashed after him and begged Frank not to leave her, as she needed a man to be with her. Frank left her. This would be a theme in his life: lack of commitment. There is one woman Frank managed to commit to, and even that didn't last more than 5 years. But considering the relationships he has had, 5 years looks like an eternity. The man had a cut-and-run record that had notable people like Elizabeth Taylor in it, but before Elizabeth Taylor there was Betty Davis. Betty Davis, one of the cougars Frank had a thing with, was a wily one. She watched Langella's movies and was taken by the actor's striking features. She called around and found out they shared an agent. Quickly she got his number from their shared agent and they began to talk. Their talks were certainly clean. They were laced with large amounts of sexual innuendo. Frank would describe their number of racy conversations as not quite phone sex, but certainly rife with foreplay. However, whatever they had promised to do to each other didn't materialize. Betty Davis always blew him off and avoided their dates. By chance they ran into each other, and as soon as Frank introduced himself, she pretended not to know him. She seethed with fury, believing Frank had invaded her privacy. Did this encounter stop Frank? Not in the least. His old lady-seeking phallus continued to rage. He landed the delectable Elizabeth Taylor when she was 69. At that time Elizabeth, who commanded the attention of men and made them tingle with anticipation, was alone. He found himself in her house and accepted her request for him to put her to sleep. He helped Elizabeth up, pushing her from the back and into her room. As if to make up for her crushing loneliness, Elizabeth had her bed filled with dozens and dozens of bottles of witch hazel that she used to remove her makeup, and a huge box of chocolates on her bed. Also her room had pictures of her dead former husband strewn about. Well, it may not be about loneliness. She might just be lazy. But it could also be a sign of depression caused by loneliness. Bottom line, Liz had a filthy room. However, it didn't matter to Frank, who put Elizabeth to sleep anyways. Despite being internally fearful that Elizabeth would have him for lunch, he began a serious relationship with her. But he knew it would be brief. Surprisingly, the man-eater Elizabeth wanted a bit of longevity in their relationship. She even suggested that she wanted to move with him to a peaceful, quiet place, a place that's normal. But it wasn't to be. After describing Taylor as a small, sweet woman who wanted a man to be with her, protect her, and fill a void as deep as the deepest ocean, Frank wasn't sure he could help her fill up that void within her. With other women, there aren't many details about the relationship, just vagueness. There was Jackie Onassis, who he felt loved money, and the vain Bancroft, who cared too much about herself than anyone. Despite his notoriety with women, it wasn't all he was about. The thespian had talent that allowed him to hop across different artistic mediums. He was a stage actor extraordinaire, but he also had a good showing in movies and TV films. But for all of these mediums, which showcased his versatility, Langella loved the stage the most. He, unlike other actors, didn't actively pursue movie roles, but gave everything he had for the stage. Perhaps Frank's father would have wanted his son to follow his path as a business executive who would go on to head his own business. Frank had a different plan, and his plan was the theatre. Beginning his education in Bayonne, as he attended Washington Elementary School and Bayonne High School, the stage legend changed schools when they moved to New Jersey. In New Jersey he attended and graduated from Columbia High School, studying drama at Syracuse University. Unlike other stars who would drop out of the university to pursue acting, Frank completed his university education. After graduation, Frank performed in regional repertory before joining the Lincoln Center Repertory Company. He would be part of the original members of the company. Always ready to learn and improve his craft, he added to his college knowledge by studying under Elia Kazan. His New York City stage debut was for The Immoralist, and he continued to dazzle the audience with the most artistic display. For 10 years he remained on the stage, and his popularity began to rise, acting in notable stage plays like The Old Glory, The White Devil, and Good Day. Langella, after years on stage, in 1970 made his film debut in Diary of a Mad Housewife, which Frank Perry directed. Then followed it with another film where he played a conman with Russian roots. His role as the conman in the 12 Years movie was miles different from his role as a man who was afraid of relationships in Diary of a Mad Housewife. Still, his versatility showed, and he skillfully impressed in both roles. The stage legend would get more film roles. He played a psychotic counter-revolutionary in The Wrath of God in 1972, and appeared in the movie The Mark of Zorro 2 years later. Then he returned to his one and only true love, the stage, where he acted in Seascape, and then in one of his most iconic roles, the blood-sucking vampire Count Dracula in Dracula. Dracula was a Broadway hit in 1977. It was so much of a hit that 2 years after there was a movie adaptation that was even given more life due to the horror filmmaking chops of John Badham, the film's director. However, purists believe that the modern horror effects stole the show from Dracula's character. The audience didn't see things the way purists did. Many people flocked to the theatre as the film was a resounding hit with the audience, particularly ladies, Langella charmed with his boundless acting skills. As a stage actor, the 1970s were impactful for the star, as he even reached larger audiences when his stage work in Eccentricities of a Nightingale and The Seagull got televised on PBS. The TV studio had a program, Theatre in America, where they covered stage plays, so by televising Frank's works, he has even more acclaim. Matured and rich with massive experience in theatre, Frank went outside of his comfort zone to direct Passion, a Broadway show, in 1980. That same year he got cast for a film, Those Lips, Those Eyes, where he acted as an unlucky actor. While Frank was anything but unlucky, his acting chops delivered the role easily. Then he returned to the stage for Amadeus. Not staying long on the stage, the actor made another switch to TV shows. He became Leonardo da Vinci in I, Leonardo, A Journey of the Mind in 1983. Guess what? He didn't pursue another TV show for the sake of consistency. The stage whispered, and Frank went running. And after 3 successful stage plays, he went by to screen acting, but this time it was an NBC show, Liberty, where he acted as Frederick Auguste Bartholdi, the sculptor. He had a movie lull in the 1980s. There were roles, but none were along the lines of quality he was used to. Still, he used the opportunity to branch out into the fantasy genre with a role in Masters of the Universe. He played a part in the unfortunate remake of And God Created Woman in 1988, and don't get us started in the movie The Men's Club, which he also acted in. So, to get his mojo back, he returned to the stage, and he had quality roles waiting for him. He shook the audience with his rendition of Sherlock Holmes in a Broadway play in 1987, and after 4 years HBO tapped him up for the on-screen version. The famed entertainer had become a legend of the stage and offered an unmatched quality for film roles. He tried his hands at on-screen villainy, and he was beyond impressive. His performances in Dave as cunning and manipulating White House Chief of Staff was iconic. Also, he had a comedic role alongside Arnold Schwarzenegger in the film Junior. Then he was a villain again in the film Doomsday Gun. Afterward, he returned to the stage and movies, acting in comedy and historical films. Then he also partook in a controversial film, Lolita, which was initially banned in the United States. Despite the advancement in years, Frank wasn't ready to retire, and in 2008 he acted in an on-screen adaptation of a 2006 stage play of Frost Nixon. The play revolved around the interview Nixon did with David Frost in 1977. Then he tried his hands with the horror genre as he starred in The Box. Also having worked with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito, he also worked with newer generation actors like Shia LaBeouf, Kirsten Dunst, Ryan Gosling and Peter Sarsgaard. His timelessness and versatility make him a delight to work with. Although awards aren't always a great hallmark of ability, Frank has managed to rack up quite a few. He got 2 Obie Awards for stage acting, and he did this before he reached 30 years old. He got 2 Drama Desk Awards, 2 Tony Awards, and an Outer Critics Circle Award. He also got an award from the National Board of Review, and he got into the American Theatre Hall of Fame. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you are new here, and if you want to support my work, please visit my Patreon page. People were always crazy about the private life of Hollywood stars. Did Sam Elliott have propositions from men? Watch this video.